Hello and welcome back to the Bonsai Stuff Podcast. As always, Scott Martin from Bonsai Matsu, and you know that I love you being around. I love your company. Hopefully you are completely neck deep repotting. You're enjoying what you're doing. Hopefully the podcast over the last few weeks has provided some kind of inspiration, maybe some assistance on what to do. Hopefully that four-way tie-in hasn't done your head in. You've thrown your pliers across the workshop and said, no, I'm going back to what I was doing before. Hopefully it is something that you can work with. And I hope that you are enjoying the process. I, hand on heart, believe that repotting of our bonsai is the most important thing that we get to do. And it's quite infrequent. You know, at best, it's every couple of years, let's say, maybe 3 years on average, 4 years, 5 years sometimes, really blows out. So the changes that we get to make with our trees are few and far between. And I know from experience that when you want to do an angle change or an adjustment to the front or something like that, sitting there looking at that little piece of wire in the pot can just be like a never-ending story, a bit of taunting from the bonsai gods that make you think, I really should have done things differently when I had the opportunity. Repotting is that exact opportunity, and it's something that we get to do to make massive changes and put a smile on our dial. And I know that's what this episode of the podcast is going to be all about, is telling you a story, putting me in your shoes and hopefully alleviating some of the pressure that you put on yourself, because I know I put it on myself as well, about changes and hesitation to make changes. And I talked about being brave when it comes to making decisions or changing soil mix and that sort of thing. Well, it's easy to talk about. It's hard to do. I get that, because I am you. I'm a tree lover, I'm a bonsai lover, and when I've put my heart and soul into a tree, it can be difficult to make those changes. But this one change that I've made recently on a Chinese Quince, I finally did it. Finally did it. It's been years and years in the making, and I can tell you I feel $1 million. I feel so much better and happier that I've done it, and that I wanted to make it into its own individual podcast and talk about things, because part of what I want Bonsai Matsu to be, and part of what I want me to be in this podcast, there's three words that I use: inspire, inform, and involve. So the inspire part, that's what this part of the podcast is about. It's to really hopefully push you a little bit to make those decisions that you know in your heart of hearts that you should make, but sometimes you're really, really not this year, not this time. I'll do it next time. I'll leave it for later. Been there, done that, and that's what this whole story is going to be about with this Chinese Quince. So hopefully by the end of this episode, you've got a bit of a spark and you've got your branch cutters out and you're racing out to your trees on the bench, especially to that one that you know needs something done to it, that you're not going to put up with anymore. It's not going to be second rate anymore. It's going to be top shelf. It's going to become the best possible version of itself it possibly can be by you making those tough calls on the tree. So let's get into it. So let me give you a bit of background on this tree, just to show you how much this thing means to me and the association that I've got with this tree. So it started history with me as a little whip. It was maybe 10 centimeters tall in a little one of those skinny, narrow tube stock type pots. I picked it up for I think $1. At a club sale day at a show, walked in and thought, I don't have any quince. I'll buy a couple of those. So there was two. So there was a pair of them. And they both got the same treatment, but the end result for the trees is very, very different. So when I got them home, the first thing that I did, because it was around about the repotting time, was take it out of this long, narrow tube and put it into a grow pot. So just to put some time perspective on this, it's at least 20 years ago. I don't have records exactly when, but I worked it based on, I moved house about 15 years ago, and it was well before I moved there. And there's some other things that happened with the tree in between, which I'll get to in a second. But I reckon it's close to, if not maybe slightly more, but about, let's put 20 years on it. So 20 years for me is a is a long time. I've seen my daughters grow up well and truly in that period of time. Life has changed. I'm now a full-time bonsai professional, which at that point, the bonsai dream was something that only came to me in the middle of a night. It was never something I thought would be a reality. So it's a very, very long time ago. So this little tree started as a tiny little whip that I had nothing other than possible images from old magazines to look at to think, oh yeah, they're a beautiful tree. So with quince, one of the most attractive features is as they start getting older and as the tree starts to mature is the bark patches. So they start to drop their old bark and they get this patchwork of bark on their trunks, and they look amazing. Green to brown to grey. They're all creamy colours. They all vary, of course, and it only happens with time. So it's one of those things that when you start something as a tiny little whip, it's a long time in the future. So for me, I really had zero plans with this tree other than to just grow it on. But at that stage in my life, I really hadn't thought about the stages of development of the tree. So it was just like, put it into a bigger pot, take out the taproot, see what happens. Really, you don't have much invested in this tree, so costs you nothing. Let's just see what happens. So first couple of years for this tree was in a pot, like I said, just allowing it to grow, really doing nothing more than trying to get a bit of wire onto the trunk and get maybe a bit of movement into the trunk. So far, common story, right? You're probably saying, yep, do that with all the seedlings that I've ever started with, or when a seed grows, this is what I do with it as well. Same for me, exactly the same. But then after a few years, I took the turn of saying, okay, I'm going to start ground growing this thing. And I remember I had some raised beds that used to have veggies in them, but then suddenly turned into bonsai growing beds, as is quite common for any bonsai lunatic that decides to start doing ground growing. But at that stage, I had no idea about the kind of space that you would need, like the distance between different trees. So that things were thrown in the ground quite close to each other. I think back at that stage, I was still growing tomatoes in between the trees and beans and that sort of thing. So I was quite delusional about what I'd need to do. So anyway, this tree went from a sapling to repotted almost immediately into a larger pot, and then evolved to becoming something that was put into the ground. So with the ground growing, I was a bit more thoughtful at that stage. I knew the notion of planting onto a tile of some kind to try and get basal flare on the tree. So I'd done all that. I'd wired the trunk, got some movement in it, started thinking about the size tree that I'd want. So I was well on the path to becoming something quite nice. But the branch structuring really wasn't there because I was only focused on the girth of the tree, on the thickness of the trunk, on how it was going to develop. So then I remember we moved, and rather than leaving the trees in the ground, they got pulled out of the ground at the appropriate time, thrown into some poly boxes, some polystyrene fruit boxes, and they were moved from one house to the other. Now, it could have, at that stage, quite easily moved from the ground growing phase into a pot phase, but I decided that wasn't the case because I still wanted more development. I'd love the idea of a quince because the Chinese quince has a larger leaf variety and the fruit on it is quite large as well, that I really wanted something which was going to be in proportion for the trunk to the size of the leaf that I was going to have. And there was a lot of beautiful things to also admire when it came to autumn. The leaves go a beautiful orangey red colour and seem to hang around on the tree. They don't drop quite as easily as the maple leaves. So it was something that I really wanted to put my back into and invest in. So as you can probably tell by about this stage in the tree's life, I'm developing a relationship with this tree. We are on the same page. The tree's meeting its end of the bargain, and I'm doing mine as well to develop this tree into something that I want to live forever. So after being out of the ground in a poly box for about 12 months, I went, no, I've got a new yard now, beautiful open area before some neighbours built a tree and took away all my sunshine in that part of the yard, which is common for me in suburbia. So I had this beautiful, fertile ground through the tree in the ground with its twin, twinish, and they started to take off. Grew exceptionally well. Like I'm talking the first 12 months being in the ground again, did extremely well. Massive growth, big cutback, lots of scars, lots of healing on scars that were there in the past. But I started to evolve the process of branch selection at this point as well, because I could see that the trunk had developed really, really well. The sort of twist that I'd had on the trunk, or the movement on the trunk, had really started to set, and I started to think, okay, so this tree is going to finish around about the 60 centimetre mark, which is nice. So I can start putting in some unusual kind of movement, starting to think about taper on the tree, really starting to work on a plan. By this stage, the Bonsai Matsu thing had really started to take hold, and I was really starting to get invested in the future in bonsai. So things were becoming more and more serious for me, and the tree was part of that journey. But it got to a point where low down on the trunk, some branches had come out at the same spot on the trunk, and rather than making the right call at that stage, I went, you know what, I'll just leave it and see what happens. I'll leave it. And one of them was slightly on the inside of a bend, which for me I don't find quite pleasing. It's not a game changer by any stretch of the imagination, but just for me, I'd heard don't grow things on the inside of the trunk, inside of bends, and I thought, well, you know what, I'm going to leave it. I don't mind if things don't comply 100% with the rules of bonsai as I thought of them back then. But I really wasn't that fussed about it. I thought, oh, well, I'll sort it out later. That'll come later. But little did I know that this bond would get stronger and stronger and stronger, and cutting off more significant components of the tree suddenly got to be harder and harder and harder. So I started looking at going, it probably should go, but if I look at it from this angle, that branch looks good, and the one that's on the opposite side could maybe push towards the back of the tree a little bit more and become a bit of a depth branch. So therefore, that bar branching that I'm seeing, maybe it's not as big a deal as what I'm making it out to be. So I was doing this justification in my head for inaction, and not doing the right thing for this tree. So I could see what was happening with it in the ground. Had a good couple of years in the ground, really developed quite nicely. That massive extension growth, that massive cutback, and I thought, I've got the trunk as I want it now. The Nabara is really nice. Yeah, probably could have stayed in the ground for another couple of years, but it's like, I think it's ready. I think it's ready to start the next step where I can start really honing in on some, primary branch selection, which was what I was absolutely avoiding, and secondary branch, and then really starting to build the structure of the tree, because spring would come around and these most magnificent bright pink flowers come around. I'd look at it and go, you are so beautiful. And then autumn would come around and the leaf would change colour and the fruit would be on there as well. And I just think, life doesn't get much better with this Chinese Quince. This is really, I really want to make this into a bonsai. So then it evolved from going out of the ground into like another smaller grow container. Then it evolved from that after a couple of years going into a type of bonsai pot, not the final pot, but something that would help me build the root system closer in and start working that without damaging the tree, start working or making too much of a drastic decision, start working on the finer feeder roots for the tree, which by this stage I know that's the future of the tree. It's not the big thick roots, it's those fine feeder roots that are really going to be future success for this tree. So then it went from there after a couple of years into a container, an unglazed container, which looks really nice with the orange and the yellow fruit that it gets on it as well. But it wasn't final for me. I'd been looking at it thinking it's a nice transition stage, but it had been 4 years. So it was last potted into that pot 4 years ago. So 2022, it's now 2026 for reference. If you're listening to this podcast sometime in the future, then that's basically the time that I've had. And so in that 4 year period, really, that's when a lot of work got done on pruning and selection and whatever. And that's when the most procrastination happened about this branch. So I'd started to look at thinking the trunk line that I've chosen for the front of the tree in that pot possibly needs to change. because the Nabari looks a bit nicer if I can rotate it around. And I'm thinking, okay, so looking at the way the apex is developed to it probably is out of whack when it comes to angle of the trunk as well. That needs to probably change. There's a bit too much straightness in one section of the trunk that I want to try and eliminate. And I've got to incorporate maintaining this key branch. It's smack on the inside of a bend coming towards you sort of on the lower right-hand side of the tree. And I was compromising. Everything I was doing with this tree was compromising. The fact that I was scared. I wasn't brave enough to make the right decision with this tree. That is until now. So to put a timestamp on this, if you imagine that I've just recorded the Be Brave podcast. And I basically had a good hard look at myself in the mirror and went, you know what? You know exactly what you got to do. It was on the bench to be repotted, this tree. Like it had already been lined up, ready to go. It won that, 4 years, that's long enough for this tree. Everything was starting to slow down a little bit. I was a bit nervous about a few little branches that had died back, which is common with the Chinese Quince during the autumn period. And I was thinking, you know what, it needs a repot. So I thought, okay, things that I want to change. Like this is going to be a hamburger with a lot when I get into this tree, because I thought I want to change the pot. I had a nicer cream-coloured oval pot that would suit this tree beautifully with that bark. That would just look magnificent. With the green foliage on it too would look so much nicer, and the orangey red would look great against it. The yellow of the fruit probably wouldn't be quite as dramatic, but the yellow of the fruit with the reddy colour of the leaves with the cream coloured pot with this mottled trunk. It's what I'd had put aside for quite a while. So anyway, that was definitely number one on the agenda, was change the pot. But then when I started thinking about it, running through the back of my head is be brave. You know what you've got to do. Like you have to do it. I'd sit there and I'd put a tea towel over or a cloth in front of the branch, thinking, it's got to go. And then I'd look at the branch and I'd say, it's too straight. It's like a peg. Like, yeah, sure, there's a lot of foliage on it, but the core of that primary branch is a peg. And then I started thinking, okay, I could cut it back to a nicer secondary branch. I could build taper into it. I could do this. I could do that. And then I just basically slapped myself in the face and said, you can cut it off. That's what you'd tell everyone else. If someone walked into the workshop with this exact tree, first thing you'd say is, I know you've grown that branch there throughout such a long period of time. I know you've maintained it, but it's got to go. For the composition, the best design of this tree, for this tree to become the best possible bonsai that it can, that branch needs to go. There's no two ways about it. So with that in mind, I still didn't cut it off. What I did was I knew that I wanted to rotate the front of the tree to get the best possible angle for this trunk movement that I had. So I did that step one. Step one was the new pot, got that ready to go, took the tree out of the pot, started to work on rotating the front, saying, okay, that if I just ignore that key branch that's there right now, this is quite possibly the best front that I can get on this tree. There's always arguments as to what the best front is, but for me, looking at this tree for so many years and having such a close relationship with it, that I thought, this is what I like looking at when I go past a tree. And the angle change, it needs to tilt slightly. So if I rotate the front and I tilt the tree slightly, then it was like a light bulb going on for me. It's like, well, that branch has to go now, because that branch now is taking a space in the negative space part of the design of the tree, where the tree would sort of frame that by moving away to the left and then coming back towards the right with all this beautiful movement and nice taper on the trunk and this beautiful patchwork showing really nicely with what was the back branch, the bar branch for this branch that I was looking at getting rid of, suddenly rotating around a little bit, becoming a nice first branch on the left side of the tree, framing up beautifully around to the right-hand side. I looked at it and went, that's now made it as clear as day. And if you don't do it now, then you may as well get your branch cutters and put them in the bin, because if you don't do it now, there's no better reason or justification to get rid of this. So I tied the tree into the pot, mounted it up, got it all perfectly spot on, absolutely perfect. Worked it in, did the 4-way tie-in, put in the new soil, wiggled it in, got it all right to go, took it outside, gave it a water with the sphagnum moss on top. Absolutely everything was done bar this branch being cut off. And I sat down, brought it back inside the workshop, looked at it, got out my large branch cutters and went, done. And I walked over. I must admit I did hesitate for about half a second, but then when I cut it off, I went, that is so much better. This is the feeling that I've had before with trees where I've done exactly the same thing. And this is where I push and try and encourage and support the bonsai practitioners, that the bonsai lovers that have this same hesitation, because I know how hard it is. I know that it can be one of these steps that you may never get over. You may honestly, like I could have quite easily taken this tree out of the pot, repotted in exactly the same position, live with it quite happily forever and ever and ever, amen, with the tree's characteristics that I love so much. But by doing these changes that I talk about, it made me so much happier, and it made the tree jump. Like, it made the tree really change in its perspective completely. And it seems, and you talk to someone, you know, in the non-bonsai world, and you talk about how you rotated the trunk and tilted it slightly and then cut off a branch and the tree looked completely different. They're like, what else? It's like, but for me, like when someone says, oh, I've done this and I've done that and now it's complete, I get it. I can see it. Like, I know that those minor changes, those brave steps that we take when we make these changes that don't come easily can have such a profound impact. And, you know, I sat back and looked at it, and I was really happy with myself. And I didn't, you know, sometimes when I take time to make decisions, I sort of give myself a bit of a kicking, saying you should have done that earlier. You know, if it's something serious like, you know, not repotting a tree when it should have been repotted, which is something, again, a future podcast episode coming up. But if it's something like that, then I give myself kicking, because it's got to do with the health of the tree and the strength and that perpetual ability for the tree to take steps forward that I've impacted because I've made a bad decision or I've been lazy or whatever it is. They're the ones that I get quite upset with myself about. But when it's something like this that, you know, yeah, sure, you can get swelling, you can get inverse taper when it comes to not making a decision on bar branches. This it hadn't happened. Like, I hadn't got swelling like that in this part of the tree, and it hadn't, you know, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So I hadn't really taken a step backwards. I hadn't lost anything. It's not a tree that I put on display for the world. It's more a tree for me because I love it, and I enjoy the fact that this tree's been with me for a long period, and it's still got a long way to go, but it's now on the right path, which is so important for me to know that, you know, from now on, that tree is just going to keep getting better and better and better. Will the characteristics of the tree change that I love? No, they won't. The bark will still be the same. The flowers will still be the same. The leaf colour will still be the same. The fruit will still be the same. That won't change at all. It's that feeling that I'm going to get when I walk past the tree and go, you are just beautiful. I love you. And that's not for anyone else. It's not for the world to make a decision on. It's not for anyone to give their 2 cents on. It's just purely for me. And that's for me what really the bonsai journey is all about. And this being brave moment, I wanted to share it with you. I could have quite easily just swept this under the rug and, oh yeah, I do that all the time. No worries. Yeah. What, you don't have the courage to cut a branch off that's been there for 20 years? Why not? Yeah, no, I feel you, because we're all the same. Like I said earlier, and we are just the same people that love trees, and making tough decisions and cutting off significant things that have been there for a very long time is very hard. So I'd strongly urge you that where you can, knock off that bud when it's at that stage that you know is going to be in the wrong spot. Don't let it develop. Don't let it grow. Don't let it forge a relationship with you for the next 20 years where you can't cut it off and it goes about, you know, maybe altering or affecting the beauty of the bonsai that's staring in front of you. Being brave, it's tough. I get it. It's really tough. But making those decisions and like I said, I want to talk about it now because that change of angle, the rotation of the front made such a big difference, and it actually was the final piece of the puzzle for me, to get those two right, rather than looking at it again for another year in a pot, going, well, it's, if I decided not to repot it for another year, which would have been disastrous for the tree, but if I decided not to, then that branch would be there yet one more year in my bonsai life. And by making that rotation of the front, that angle change of the trunk, the tilting, then it made it really easy for me. It stood out quite clearly that it needed to be removed. I really love this format of the podcast that sort of allows for vulnerabilities, I suppose, for me and for you. And I see that when people have got the guts to share with me and ask for advice, because I know that's not easy. Well, it's not easy for me to put my hand up and say, hey, I don't know what to do. Whether it's changing the nabari, changing the pot, changing the angle, whether it's removing a trunk, whether it's changing the apex of the tree. I know that all takes possibly something that you may not be in your set of skills right now, but it's one of those things that you can build up over time. Like I said, for me, that this quince has been developing for 20 years, and it's only now, really now, that I look at it and think, this is at the pointy end of where I want to develop the tree. So now it's that real fine refinement stage, and making that tough decision to remove a branch can really allow me to get to that next level. So hopefully you enjoyed the podcast. It may not be a cup of tea for everybody, especially people that go, yeah, I do that stuff every day of the week. But I know from experience that it affects almost everybody when you've got that loving relationship with a tree that you've nurtured may not be necessarily forever, but it may be a long time that you've spent watering that thing and looking at it every single day of its life, that it becomes part of who you are. And I know that this quince for me, it was a lot of lessons, and a lot has happened in my life over the last 20 years. So it's been there for me. So it's now going to be there a hell of a lot more. So I hope you enjoyed it. Anyway, thanks for listening in. Give your trees a cuddle for me. Until next time, happy bonsai.